Hi everyone, it's Rena. So this video is if you have your sun in Virgo and your moon in Pisces. Virgo and Pisces are opposite signs, and so it's kind of like a seesaw effect because you're looking at the sun and the moon, and it's giving you the outer and the inner nature, and then you add to that the opposite signs, and it really enhances this idea of maybe going from one extreme to the other and needing to find balance because in the astrological chart, Virgo rules the sixth house. Virgo is an earth sign, and so it rules the sixth house of work, or what I call it, your service to others, your daily schedule or your time management, how you order your time or your days, as well as your health. And so these are practical matters. That's why it's connected to the earth. The 12th house, ruled by Pisces, is about the spiritual realms, past lives. It's ruled by Neptune. It is not material, it is immaterial. And therefore, it's not considered practical. It's not mundane. So you're dealing with this kind of dichotomy here. And this is playing out with the sun and moon. The sun is the aspirational self. It's what you are trying to achieve in this incarnation, because obviously your soul is not a Virgo. This is a temporary designation for this lifetime. And Virgo people are very concerned about being productive, about improving situations in life. And this can take a variety of forms. A Virgo person is going to typically be intelligent, or I like to say intellectual, because that means that they're seeking information and that type of mental stimulation. You can have the raw material and be intelligent, have a high enough IQ that you can function well intellectually, but not be an intellectual, but not care about learning. I do believe there are people like that. So the point is that Virgo is using this information for making things better in life, for improvement, whether it's self-improvement or improvement of conditions in life. It's not frivolous, the acquisition of knowledge. It's serving a practical purpose. And this can lead Virgo people to gravitate towards careers like teaching, where they can disseminate information. Anything where they can teach or train others. Also, I think about Virgo as the consummate secretary. I don't think they use that term these days. They might say office manager. If they even have office managers with computers, they might not even need that either. But Virgo is very organized, and so they can organize a space and they can keep other people on track because they pay attention to little details. There's a perfectionistic streak in Virgo that it can be a double-edged sword. On the positive end, it can really do a good job, and and have a desire to do a good job. And if your Mars is also in Virgo as a sun in Virgo, then you're coming from a very industrious desire, a desire for being industrious, for being gosh, I'm thinking of a particular word that means where you're not being shoddy, sloppy, precise, precision, things like that. There's a desire for excellence. It's not really excellence. Thoroughness in Virgo, that it can be very good because the person is paying attention to what they're doing. However, it can easily go overboard and the person can get bogged down in details, and they can also, it can almost be OCD, where the person's a little bit, obsessive compulsive, a little bit too concerned with every little thing. So it's a fine line to walk. So the moon in Pisces is super duper emotional. Pisces is a water sign, and so it is already by nature living life through the emotions. And then you add to it that this is the moon position, and you have somebody that is extremely sensitive. And it's not just a case of being sensitive personally with your own feelings. You are an empath on steroids. And so I've been doing videos where, like, I just did a combination of the sun in Scorpio and the moon in Taurus. And I was noting how that opposite version, where the moon is in Scorpio and the sun is in Taurus, is so much more difficult in a way, as far as I'm concerned, because when you have the sun in earth and the moon in water, the water is can really dominate, and the sun is supposed to be the dominant force. So, and when I say that, that's how I see it. I feel like the sun leads the way and shines the light. But yeah, so you may get overwhelmed with your emotions. Being an empath and feeling other people's emotions can be particularly difficult and draining, because it's one thing to have your own emotional reactions to life, but when it's occurring with people you might not even know on the street, and you're just having these feelings, and you don't know why you're feeling what you're feeling, you just know that you are, it can be something which kind of takes over, and you have this sense of whatever strong emotion it is, but you really don't know why you're feeling that way, because it's not really connected to your life in particular. It's one thing if you're dealing with a certain thing in life and you know exactly why you're feeling a certain way, but that's not always what happens. Neptune has porous boundaries, so it's very easy for the moon in Pisces person to be affected by their environment. And this is why it is super important, if you have this moon sign, regardless of what the sun sign is, that you choose your company wisely, whether it's friends or whether it is even family members, sometimes unfortunately, but also with partners. Because water is very malleable, and Pisces and Virgo are mutable signs, so they do tend to be quite flexible in that way, and they can create a lot of, the ability to take on to be influenced by the environment, but especially, it's not so much the Virgo, but definitely the Pisces because of the water element. And this can influence your emotional nature. So I'm thinking of that one song. Who was it by? Was it Stephen Stills? Called "Love the One You're With." And that can be what that can be kind of the motto or unconscious motto of Pisces, because it is that emotional nature. So whatever environment you're in, and that could be kind of fickle. And I think that Pisces does have a fickle quality about itself, as a water sign, because it is a mutable sign, and it can change. So you're with a certain person and you decide that you love that person when before you love somebody else. The thing about one of the things I was really that has become my belief about these two signs is that they share certain things in common. Even though they're opposite signs, they're also called complementary signs, and they will have certain things that are at least somewhat similar. And the one that I'm thinking of is being a pushover, and I will say that about Virgo as well, is that it's a pushover. Obviously, it depends on other factors if this is going to be front and center, because if you are a Virgo, you may have inner planets in Leo, and that can give you more of a backbone, more of a sense of your own self-worth, and you may feel like, I have to put my foot down here. I can't be wishy-washy. I can't allow somebody to run roughshod over me. The problem with the moon in Pisces is that the person may have gone through trauma in life. I talk about this with all the water signs, but Pisces is the last water sign, and typically a person with a prominent Pisces sun, moon, or rising, in my opinion, they may have grown up in an environment that was chaotic. I'm not saying 100% of the time. You might have had a perfect childhood, as far as I could see. As far as I'm concerned, maybe you have had a really good childhood. But I do think that Neptune is connected to addiction. It can be like mental illness, living in a fantasy, deception. These are some of the more challenging things I'm talking about. But martyrdom. And so the child who grows up in this environment may see some of that growing up. And what it does, if you have had parents, for instance, that had an addiction, then you see that adults are not perfect, and you don't have that godlike view of adults. And that's a good thing, actually, because a lot of other signs can go many, many years with that belief that their parents can do no wrong, because they were more functional on the surface, but they get fooled in other ways. In the worst case scenario, if a Pisces person had to kind of fend for themselves as a child, it at least develops the skills of survival. However, what can happen is it can leave that person with a sense of learned helplessness, that life is completely unpredictable. You never know what's going to happen. And it's almost like a sense of, there's like a fatalistic part of Pisces as a sign. And that's why, that's one of the reasons, besides just being naturally very intuitive and, spiritual, is that they can gravitate towards things like astrology, especially astrological transits, because they want to find out what's going to happen. They have divorced themselves from having the ability to make things happen. And that is problematic, obviously, because it can encourage passivity. This is a double feminine sign, combination. So passivity is part of the feminine energy, the yin energy. And I think some people have a reaction towards that word passivity as something bad, when it's really being receptive to the environment, rather than the yang or the masculine, which is trying to impose its energy onto the world. It's not taking it in. We have to have both. We can't be totally, aggressive, if you want to say the opposite of passive, but we can't be totally passive either. We have to be able to accept and also to put forth. And, one without the other isn't going to work. So, this is a situation where a person may be, with the sun in Virgo, may be trying to do things for themselves that are very practical, maybe working hard, graduating college might be a big goal, whatever, having a profession. But the moon, the emotional nature, keeps pulling them either down or away from that practical, those practical goals. And so in some cases, you may have a tendency to be a self-defeatist, where you're negative about your potential. And, that overwhelms you to the point of, blocking yourself from being able to achieve your goals. I shouldn't say blocking. That would be more like a square where there's an obstacle. What I mean is that you may kind of like have that seesaw where you go back and forth, and it's like two extremes, where you're very productive and then you have a bout of self-doubt. Now, can depression and or anxiety be a thing? I think that how I would characterize this as more like a sense of not having that power, being powerless. And that can definitely lead to feeling maybe some anxiety about whether you can reach your potential, because Virgo wants that sense of orderliness, wants that sense of rational life, doesn't want the irrational, doesn't want chaos. And so I think that in that case, in that sense, it's very good, because you're always going to come back to that. But what you have to do is you have to avoid drowning in your emotions. And I think a lot of this can be, like with the moon in Pisces, can be post-traumatic stress disorder, where the person, especially as they leave that home environment, if it was chaotic, they begin to experience this type of anxiety or what have you, or even down depressed moods if they're they're kind of, it's almost like, oh, what do you call it? You're detoxing. So this is one of the things that I feel like is very important, is that when you're feeling uncomfortable feelings, that it's important not to identify with those feelings and to see them as signs of things that you have been through that are coming back up for you, to be able to, almost like it's like the infinite wisdom that rules the body, and the mundane mind is able to know when you're strong enough to handle certain things, like kind of like with repressed memories that come up later on in life. But just in general, those feelings that are very challenging, they're signals. They're trying to tell a person something. And as somebody myself who had panic disorder, I remember one day walking to a bookstore and opening up a book that was, I think, about how to deal with anxiety or something like that. And it said something like, the anxiety is due to the fact that the person is afraid of experiencing that situation again, and it creates a sense of adrenaline. It releases adrenaline because of the thought itself. So it's actually like, and they said it much better than that, but the point is that it becomes this self-perpetuating thing, because you have usually the first panic attack comes totally unexpected. You had no idea. And then you start to anticipate, oh my God, what if that happens again? And that thought of, oh my God, what happens if that happens again, starts to trigger it even more. And so you can have, panic from a secondary source, from your thoughts. So it goes without saying that meditation and other self-soothing practices are recommended, because one of the things that I think happens too when you have this moon in Pisces is, it's like resistance to some of the things that you have been dealing with, or that you are dealing with. So whether it's resistance to past events that are still affecting you, or whether it is resistance to a current situation that makes you feel uncomfortable. A big one, I feel like, is wanting to go in a different direction. I'm talking about if you are somebody maybe in your late teens, early 20s, maybe going in, throughout your 20s, and you don't have this desire to go in the direction that your parents want you to go in, but you are a people pleaser. This can be a combination of people who are people pleasers on steroids, and that is, very likely a culprit in anxiety and even depression, because you're suppressing your own light and what you came here for, and you're being dominated by someone else. And this combination can be ripe for being dominated. And before I continue, because there's always going to be one in the crowd that says, you're not a mental health specialist, you can't diagnose these things, I'm not pretending to be a mental health specialist, and I'm not diagnosing anything because I'm not dealing with individuals. It should go without saying that this is my opinion, not being in the mental health field. And it certainly doesn't encompass every single case of anxiety or depression. I'm not saying that it ever would. But I do think that when people suppress their own needs, trying to make other people happy, which isn't our job as individuals, that they can feel a sense of, first of all, not going after their dreams and not following their bliss, but then also a sense of oppression. Um, isn't it funny? Oppression and depression, that they can it's almost it is it's like that martyrdom, that self-sacrifice. And for what? What is a person getting in return? They're not happy. So it's very important that you don't fall into that savior complex where you are trying. That's definitely a Pisces thing, where you're trying to make other people happy, just like when you're a child and you saw your parent depressed or drinking, um, or chronically angry, that you unconsciously believed it was your fault, or you think it's your responsibility to solve that for them because you're a natural healer. I mean, and because the sixth house that Virgo rules is connected to health, you may go into the healthcare field. But I think at some point that a lot of you will begin to connect the dots and see that health is not just that we are not dumb flesh that is not activated by something higher. And so therefore, there is something else that affects health besides just whatever is going on the physical 3D level. And you will see the body-mind connection. And maybe that will lead to going from nursing to Reiki healing at some point. So, or whatever, other kinds of healing. In terms of relationships, this combination can have porous boundaries. You may be dominated by somebody because you're double feminine, even as a man. Feminine doesn't mean effeminate, by the way. It just means that there is a more receptive quality to the person. So typically, we think of men as aggressive. But a man who's a double, I have to qualify that, but a man who's a double feminine sign may be more passive and allow his partner to, I don't want to say control him, but it could be at the, worst case scenario, but to have their way. They go along with whatever the other person wants and stuff like that. But in some cases, I have found, this is kind of a funny thing. Men who are feminine signs, so earth and water signs, to me, they tend to be more macho, especially water tends to be more macho. But that might be more if the water is the sun sign, not the moon sign, because I have found that Virgo as a feminine sign for men, the men can be surprisingly, I don't know what to call it, because basically, I don't know how to explain it, but like in dealing with women, where they are much more treating women as just another person. So I'm not going to just say not sexist, because especially the water sign men, my experience with them and the other earth signs is that they tend to be macho. Okay, so being macho mean, to me, it doesn't mean that they are disrespecting women necessarily. But what they can do is they can just be a man's man, where they tend to like to just hang around with men, and they look at women as just like another species. And like, for instance, a fire sign or an air sign man might treat a woman as one of the guys. And that is something that is very interesting and ironic, because a masculine sign man, shouldn't he be macho? But they tend to be very progressive. Whereas the feminine signs can be more conservative. So they might tend to be more traditional in how they view gender roles and things like that. So, for what that's worth. So you have to, whether you're a man or a woman, do not allow yourself to be a victim in a relationship, or to be so dominated that you are not really, speaking up and having your own voice, and that you never get to have your needs met, that you're always meeting somebody else's needs. And the same thing if you become a parent, is that you have to be able to have boundaries, because I could see a combination like this as permissive with children, meaning that they want to be liked, they don't want to, it might veer between criticism and being too lax. It could go those two ways, because Virgo does tend to be kind of persnickety and have certain things that they want their own way. I'm not sure, because the moon in Pisces may overwhelm everything, depending on other factors. And being permissive, meaning that anything goes, and letting the child almost like rule the household, that can, come back to haunt you in 10 years when the child is, or 13 years when the child becomes a teenager. You may see how you've created a monster. Being more, I think Virgos make good parents, though, because they want to teach their children things. They want their children, and children want to learn. That's the thing. Children want to learn, and children want to help. So curbing any kind of tendency towards criticism is so crucial, and that perfectionistic sense of things, because that can ruin so many things. With the moon in Pisces, you may be naturally very psychic and naturally very creative, but that sun in Virgo can be very skeptical, can kind of write things off, and can look at your artistic talents and say, yeah, but can you make a living doing that? And just put it on the shelf and act like it doesn't matter, when it's coming from your emotional nature. It's like you need it to breathe. By the way, the moon can represent the mother, and you may have had a mother who was very either lax in discipline, and therefore you were left to your own devices, or was addicted, or mentally ill in some cases, lived in her own dream world. And it could be something, it doesn't have to be that, challenging. It could be that you had a very devoutly spiritual mother, and that kind of rubbed off on you. But if it was something that was more challenging, and let's say you're a woman, you have to make sure that you don't take after her, or that you totally reject that softness or that vulnerability, and try to be more like the Virgo and just shut out your sensitivity. Because I could see that might happen with some people, that they don't really acknowledge their vulnerable side. They try to be very much, very productive and organized, but they're really fending off that chaos that they think is impending if they don't keep everything together. But then they're denying their feelings. So making peace with whatever that was and not becoming like that, not becoming that damsel in distress, that lost, that little girl that is, grown up and still is in that state of being very kind of lost and confused. And so, yeah, I think I'll leave it there. I've talked, Lord knows I've talked long enough about it. Oh, one thing I wanted to say too is that there can be an escapist tendency when you have your moon in Pisces because, Neptune is like, can rule escapism. And this is where, the reputation of Pisces as a substance abuser comes into it. But it might not be in that area. You might be put off if you came from that background to engage in mind-altering substances. And maybe you like to watch a lot of movies, or you get caught up in relationships and you're like a love addict or something like that. The key is to integrate, to be able to be productive and yet have that sensitivity and not be overwhelmed by it, and somehow find a way to get these two polar opposites together. And that comes with awareness. I think that's the greatest gift that you have, is the ability, if you can be aware of that dichotomy within you, you can give in to the other side of yourself. The sun that is in some cases, a workaholic, having to soften itself and acknowledge that it has emotional needs, and yet that moon in Pisces needing to become less, less astral projecting and more, doing grounded things like working and maybe exercising. Some exercises like running are supposed to kind of stimulate that third chakra, which has to do with power. And there's a great book on the chakra system and different exercises you can do. The woman's last name is Judith, and it's called Wheels of Life. So I highly recommend that because it can help you, in a very holistic kind of a way to unblock some of these energy centers of the body. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a personal reading, the link is below. Take care.